Judd on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Have you heard from him at all of why he's not here? And then do you have any indication of when you'll see him?
I have not. It's voluntary when guys are here. We've had outstanding participation. We almost 95%. There's a couple guys. I know one guy's missing today because his daughter is graduating, but for the most part, we have had outstanding participation, and so we'll just see when the minicamp shows up.
That was Vikings coach Mike Zimmer talking about Danielle Hunter, who has been absent at the OTAs. Welcome into Mackey and Judd. You might notice somebody missing. That would be Phil Mackey. He will join us later in the show. Some duties called him away, but that's okay because his substitute is our good friend and the always full of information scoop master, Channel 5 Eyewitness News, and also Score North, Darren Doogie Wolfson. Dukes, what's going on, man?
Good morning, Judd. The player that Mike Zimmer was referring to there that is home for his daughter's graduation would be Patrick Peterson.
I was going to ask if this was
home
like a
in
kindergarten.
Arizona. Yeah,
a kindergarten graduation?
Yeah, I don't know
or
if it's preschool, kindergarten.
He's old enough, though, to have a kid who's a little bit like, because if this was like a 5-year-old, get back to camp.
Well, and it might even be in elementary school. I don't know how old his daughter is.
Yeah.
But I'm told he's back in Arizona attending to some family business.
Okay.
Nothing of the emergency ilk. He'll be back next week.
Look at you. Look at you providing a scoop already, a pre-scoop of the scoops, because I want to ask you about this. Now, Danielle Hunter is forfeiting, I believe, approximately $100,000 in workout bonuses by not going to the OTAs. But as we point out every time around this year, OTAs are optional, so you do not have to go. So, like, if you don't go, you can't be actively fined. In 2 weeks, I believe it is a week from this past Tuesday, the Vikings will host their 3-day mandatory, and that's the key word, minicamp at TCO Performance Center. Danielle Hunter wants a new contract. We've talked about that. You've given us the scoop on that for months now. Danielle Hunter is staying away from the participation activities that are not mandatory. We've known that. What do you think is going to take place in 2 weeks? Because I will set you up by saying this. If Danielle Hunter shows up, it's a clear sign that he's not happy, but he thinks there's been progress made and we're getting closer to something that's going to satisfy him. If he does not show up, it will be the first truly tangible thing that we have indicating that if he does not have a new contract for training camp, he might hold out. What is your expectation?
So that mandatory minicamp is June 15th to 17th. If he doesn't show up, the fine money would be approximately $95,000, give or take $1,000 or two. So, that's a pretty significant amount of money. I don't care how much money you have, right? Mm-hmm. I am on record on this podcast, on this show, going back weeks, that Danielle Hunter is not a me type guy, doesn't enjoy the spotlight, likely isn't one that wants to pay the fine money. But is he the one driving this bus? Or is it more his representation? So how much progress, is there tangible progress made in the next 12 days or so, where there is an indication that the Vikings ultimately are going to give him a raise, where it would make logical sense for him to show up? Or do talks go nowhere over the next 10 to 12 days, thus Danielle ends up skipping mandatory minicamp? I don't know how I would handicap it at this point, Judd. I'm telling you, I'm led to believe he is not one that wants to pay the fine money. But if his agent is in his ear enough, long-standing relationship with his agent Zeke, convinces him enough, hey, we're not making progress, you need to make a stand, you cannot be an Egan in mid-June, I guess I wouldn't be overly shocked. So I know I'm waffling there a little bit.
Right.
I think a lot of it depends on what takes place. Undoubtedly, there are going to be talks. It's not like Rob Brzezinski is doing nothing right now.
I was going to say, and
sure,
there have
he's
been
working on a
talks,
Brian
right?
O'Neill extension.
Yeah.
He's working on a Harrison Smith extension.
Sure.
They signed officially as of this morning a free agent cornerback, Ty Smith. Mm-hmm. They are still engaging on some other free agents, the Geno Atkins of the world. So they're actively seeking other avenues to improve their team. But they know what they need to do internally. So undoubtedly there are going to be talks. Rob Brzezinski, Danielle Hunter's agent. How do those talks progress? Do they progress in the next 10 to 12 days. But I guess right now, I would not be overly shocked if on June 15th, Danielle Hunter is not on the field.
Do you buy that he and Zim are not in communication?
I think there's been some communication. Now, has it been a phone conversation, text messages? I'm led to believe that Danielle Hunter has communicated with more than Andre Patterson at TCO Performance
Would
Center.
make sense if you want to. Yeah.
And it's not like he's communicating with just the assistant defensive line coach. And certainly teammates, right? I mean, the defensive line has Michael Pierce is talking.
But I mean,
to
the
me about
Vikings
this,
have known for quite a
the
while
group
what he
chat
wants.
and all that. Yeah,
This is not new breaking information to them.
I mean, I'm more curious because I still believe, Judd, they are going to give him a raise.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more curious to see what the happy medium is because I'm telling you, that Joey Bosa contract, but that's an outlier.
Right.
Like, kudos to Bosa, his representation for getting the Chargers to bite on that money. And he's a good player. But, like, I think if you took a poll of most front offices, they would tell you they would prefer. Now, we need to see Danielle coming off a very major surgery.
Yes.
But I think most front offices, I'm trying to be objective here, not wear my Minnesota sports hat here, right? I think most front offices would say, give me Danielle, right? Am I wrong on that? Like, I think most front offices would say, give me Danielle Hunter over Joey Bosa.
If both are 100% healthy and you know it, I think you're right. Not positive, but I think so. He's an athletic freak. I mean, Hunter is he's an
and so is
athletic
Bosa,
freak.
and so is his brother. Like,
Yeah,
maybe his brother, if we included him in this equation, maybe Nick would be the one that front offices would take just based on him being the youngest of the three. Although Danielle is still not, like, Danielle is still in the prime of his career. Remember how young he was when he was selected?
Yep.
What is Danielle now? 26? 27? Maybe Declan can go to the Google real quick.
26 will be 27 in October.
Thank you, Dex.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's still very much in the prime of his career. I think they do. I do, Jed. I think they eventually take care of him. But to what extent? They are not giving him that Joey Bosa money.
Well, and would it be with the promise of what they did for Dalvin, which was, I believe, a day before the season opened against the Packers last year. Now, Dalvin showed up for training camp, and they obviously didn't play preseason games, and they essentially in the first part of training camp also didn't really use him so that he wouldn't get hurt. But I wonder, I mean, that to me is why 2 weeks from this past Tuesday is so important, because that's going to indicate where things stand. If he doesn't show up, that means he doesn't think that there's been, or his camp, to your point, which is probably more accurate, doesn't think that there's been progress. So here's what intrigues me about this entire thing. Because one, you're right. He's coming off neck surgery, herniated disc. It scares you. No question about it. It scares you in any sport, and it scares the pants off you in football. But that being said, this defense is largely remade. Like, there's a lot of different. This defense was terrible. And they're getting guys back, and they clearly signed guys. And there's no question there was a priority from the head coach and the GM to remake this defense. Patrick Peterson, just a lot of changes. But if Danielle Hunter holds out, if they don't do this, and he says, okay, that's fine. I ain't showing up. I ain't playing. I'm not. And the one thing about his contract that's intriguing to me is there's only a year left of guaranteed money. So, like, if he gets hurt, and they're like, okay, sorry, dude, he's in trouble. So if he tells them, you don't pay me, I don't show up. All of what Zim has done to remake this defense, which is still okay, becomes just okay, not great. Because now you don't have a right end that you're sure of, and you don't have a left end. So you tell me, where's the pressure from the quarterback going to come? So I do think that in some ways, despite the neck problem, Danielle Hunter has this team over a barrel. If he says, you don't pay me, I don't show all of what you've done for the past few months. If it doesn't go out the window, it certainly suffers a setback.
You add on top of that the pressure. Now, there's pressure every year, but year 8 for Mike Zimmer, Rick Spielman, there are all sorts of expectations within the Wilf family that this will be a playoff team once again, that they are much closer to the 2019 team, not the 2020 team. So you think about the high expectations internally maybe higher than a lot of other years, right? You need Danielle. You think about in March, what they tried to do in free agency. Trey Hendrickson, Carl Lawson trying to add a really good pass rusher. They swung and missed. They eventually added an interior defensive lineman in Dalvin Tomlinson. They draft a couple pass rushers, but the question marks are there. The Pitt kid, the Florida State kid.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I don't know if we can expect big things immediately. We think DJ Wanham maybe can take a step, but are you really relying on DJ Wanham for 50-something snaps a year to really generate legitimate pressure, on 8 to 10 snaps a game? I mean, that's a lot to ask. So you're right. I mean, more so than any other player on defense, Judd.
Yes.
Like, Danielle Hunter is the MVP of that defense.
Yes.
With all due respect to Harrison Smith, who's an excellent player, who needs to be one day in the Vikings Ring of Honor, or whatever they call it now.
Yeah.
The Vikings Hall of Fame.
Yep.
Great, great player. Heck, maybe we can make a case that he belongs in Canton one day. That's how good Harrison Smith is. But right now, the way the roster is configured,
Oh, absolutely.
Danielle Hunter is the most important player. And Eric Kendricks, fantastic player. How he wasn't on that NFL Top 100 list is beyond me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's Danielle Hunter. Nobody is more important than Danielle Hunter.
He is in my opinion, it might be the team, but certainly defensively, he is the linchpin.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that if he...
And that's why they take care of him eventually.
Yes. And
this regime takes care of guys when he's as important as
they've taken
any
care of a lot
them,
of guys, no
they
question about
are
it.
going to take care of him.
And the ability that you could use him to play left end, at this rate, right end, in the Saints playoff game, the interior, like if you turned him into a defensive line Swiss Army knife, I think he'd cause absolute havoc. Now that is provided that he's healthy, but you also can't assume he's not going to be.
That's why you want him in here, though.
Yeah, no, I know.
Mandatory
you're right.
minicamp or whatever, but when the pads come on 3 days into training camp, July 30th, July 31st, August 1st.
Yep.
When the pads come on, right? Like, regardless of what you're hearing from the people down at Exos in Arizona, where he's been training, how he's in phenomenal shape, he's always in phenomenal shape.
And that's not the point. Yeah, no, I'm with you on
Football shape is a bit different.
Yes.
Hitting is a bit different.
And that's what you
why
need
they
to
want
see.
him here as soon as possible when the pads come on.
Yes. The Wild, who's back, who's gone, and handicap the Parise situation for me now, because I realize a trade and or buyout is financially punitive and could be really, really bad. But I keep saying this because I've seen stories, Dukes, saying, well, they'll talk to Zach and hopefully he can come back and play a third or fourth line role. And I keep saying this. Bill Guerin worked so hard going into this season to rebuild the chemistry of this team that as much as it would hurt financially, possibly on a cap that might be flat for 5 years, nice job, National Hockey League, having an unhappy Parise who at some point in time is going to say, I'm playing pretty well, I'm not a top six guy, is something this organization doesn't need to. So how would you handicap Parise's future here and who's going to be back and who's going to be gone with this team?
Well, on Parise, I'll continue to say, I've been saying it for a while, he would welcome a change of scenery. This started a while ago. This isn't anything real new. Him being a healthy scratch at the end of the regular season, him being a healthy scratch the first 3 games of the Vegas series. There's been tension there for a while. There's been a sense from those who know Zach that Billy has been trying to get rid of him for a while. So, yeah, you're
they
right.
Traded him to the Islanders.
Yeah. Well, and Zach would have loved that.
Yeah, I know. Go back JP's team.
You're right about the cap. It looks like it's going to be flat for 5 years. You would at least get some immediate cap relief.
Yeah.
I mean, it would go up pretty high thereafter, right? Like, aren't the cap hits $7-ish, $1 million?
Yeah,
pretty quick, Declan.
Yeah.
So, but you would have that roster opening, right? You may need a forward opening, right? So you'd have that. You'd have a little bit of immediate cap relief. So I just wonder if eventually it gets to that point where it's going to be really hard to trade him, even if his agency works really hard trying to find him a new home. I don't know if there's a logical trade match. Like, what sort of money would the Wild need to take back?
Right, and they would have to eat some of that. That's the
And they would
issue.
have to eat some of it, where I just wonder if the end game, we have a ways to go to get to this point, but if the end game is eventually the buyout does happen and he gets what he wants. Now, are teams angling to sign an aging Zach Parise? I mean, what sort of contract would he get on the open market? Maybe Lamoriello with the Islanders would bite on a 1-year minimum type deal or tryout contract. But, like, what sort of deal would he get? But long way to get to that point. But I can just tell you, he absolutely would welcome a change of scenery.
And it looked like he was told by the GM and coach when he went in to talk to them for the last time. I think it was Monday or Tuesday.
Guys, because I know some guys met with Billy,
and Dean,
it would have
right?
been on Tuesday.
Well, his quote,
and Dean too. Yeah.
Zach's quotes very much reflected a guy who's been told, just sit tight, we'll do something. Like, you don't say...
Yeah, but he's also savvy enough.
Right.
Where he knows,
but he's
very careful with his public words.
Right, but he's going to play the game as he sees fit. Zach plays by Zach's rules, which is fine. He's done that for a long time.
And he's earned that right in some ways.
Right, but I just think his quotes were very much the quotes of a guy who was told, we'll work on a divorce of some sort. Because he's like, I'm not going to get into what we said. And you're right. He's very savvy, and he's a smart dude. But I can't believe he's back. And if he is back, it's going to be, I'm telling you, in January or so, he'll be playing decent and he'll go in and say, well, I should be top 6. Expansion draft.
Well, let me stop you there.
Yeah.
I can promise you that he feels this way, that if he had been in the lineup games 1 through 3, that series absolutely could have been turned out differently. If he had been put on the power play.
And this is the problem, though. So what you're saying is why you got to sever ties, because he was good because he was fresh, because he always tries hard. He's just old.
He is
like this is no
I get it.
indictment of
It's a
him as a
200-foot
player.
game, right?
Yes.
The speed isn't there,
and the speed of the game is incredible now.
Yeah, I understand.
Yes.
I get all that. Now the comeback to that is the playoffs. That's a different game.
Yes.
Than regular season game number 47 or 22. Right? That it boggles down a bit more. That his skill set could have been utilized.
Yeah.
Even if the regular season game has passed him by in some ways, he could have been utilized, certainly on the power play to some extent. And if you had used him in games 1 through 3, maybe you end up winning game 2 or game 3.
Yeah, the problem is in game 4, so he scored 3 points. He scored, I think, Dex, 2 goals and an assist. The problem is, go back and watch game 4. I believe it was the first Golden Knights goal of that game here. It's Parise who is standing in cement in the neutral zone as I believe it was Waugh of the Golden Knights flies by him. That's the problem. So it's not that he can't contribute scoring. It's that when the game is actually going back and forth, he can't execute his assignments all the time. And again, it's not, I just want to make this very clear. This is not a bash on him as a player. He's trying. But you're 36 and he has played his ass off for how long now? That catches up. So expansion draft.
Plus with the injuries, like there's an injury history,
Absolutely.
a recent injury history.
Problem.
Like his body is really beat up.
Yes. Expansion draft, Parise and Suter would help him a lot if they would waive their no move clauses. I don't think the Kraken would take either of those players.
I don't think so either.
But it's probably a pride thing as well. And if they don't waive those clauses, they have to be protected. What's your guess on guys like it would be what? Zach and Ryan and Zuccarello, and then the 3 defensemen who you would not expose?
I don't think, well, specifically the first 3 you mentioned. Yeah, I mean, I don't see a scenario where Zuccarello, Suter, or Parise would be selected. And I think Bill has to at some point, just to save face, because at some point he'll be asked the question, hey, did you go to those guys to ask them to waive their no movement clause? Like, he has to ask them at some point. I can tell you this much. It did not come up in the exit meetings earlier this week.
Okay.
I'm just telling you, I don't think if it gets to that point where Billy asks them to waive their no movement clauses, I don't think they're going to say yes. I just don't. Right? I mean, we just laid out the tension. Zach,
Parise
yeah,
probably won't.
And Bill going
spite.
back. Yeah, well,
he'll be.
And Ryan and Zach are close, right? Close enough.
Well, I think Ryan would be afraid he might get claimed. He won't, but I think he might be afraid he might get claimed. I've always heard that he has no interest in departing.
That is accurate.
Like he wants to be in town.
Yeah.
We're like Zach's like, screw it, I'll go play elsewhere.
I mean, don't forget, it was Craig Leopold when Ryan got hurt in Dallas a couple years ago. It was Craig who drove him to the
Green Bay,
to the surgery. Yeah, I mean, for hours they were in the car together. Like that just tells you how close the owner and Ryan Suter are. That I do think there's an eventual path to Ryan working in some capacity. Maybe it's a Mike Modano type role, but that Ryan works for the Wilds for many, many years post-playing career. That, he is not interested in uprooting the family and moving somewhere else, that he plans on finishing his career here in Minnesota.
Hey, you in our prep notes sent me a note about the Wolves and the playoffs. What's that note? So the Wolves are actually sending their guys to playoff games?
Well, so Jaden McDaniels is back home right now in Seattle.
All right.
Good for him.
He's not leaving Seattle to go to Denver or Phoenix to just sit in the stands to watch a playoff game.
He's home.
Yeah.
So the Seattle Sonics too.
That's one example. Anthony Edwards is under the Clutch Sports umbrella.
Okay.
Rich Paul and company. And so, Rich has LeBron and Anthony Davis, pretty much the entire Lakers roster. Anthony just through his agency is going to end up, who knows, maybe he'll be there tonight for Lakers-Suns Game 6. And if it's not a Lakers game, it'll be some other game.
Yeah.
Right? So Anthony will eventually, but just on his agency's dime, the Wolves don't need to facilitate, that.
Right.
Right? So Chris Haynes of Yahoo had the note, I think it was Game 3 of the Lakers-Suns series. Is that the first game in LA of that series? Yeah, it must have been. That the Wolves sent Jalen Noel and D'Angelo Russell. Like, D'Angelo Russell's been in the playoffs.
Wait, and he went?
Well, to me, he's genius from this
standpoint.
standpoint.
For me, dog.
Well, no. He's smart from this standpoint. Devin Booker is his guy, right? He wanted to go see Devin play for Phoenix. If you get the Wolves to foot the bill for that expensive ticket, again, I don't care how much money you have. Genius to me if you're D'Angelo Russell.
You know what?
Genius.
With the Wolves' luck, Booker probably told D'Lo, get my guy Cat here. I need Cat here. And the next thing we know, Cat's going to demand a trade to the Suns.
But I guess there's no negative. But what's the positive?
Well,
like, seriously, D'Angelo Russell needs to sit in the stands.
Yeah.
To watch a Lakers-Suns game when Staples Center is maybe half full.
I don't get that.
I don't really understand.
I sort of get the young players who maybe haven't been in the playoffs
even
ever,
Jalen
but I wouldn't
Noel,
be doing
is
that.
Jalen Noel
No,
benefiting that much from sitting in the stands?
If you're going to send anyone, send the poor people who have had season tickets to this woebegone franchise since day one. Send them to a playoff game and say, this is what it's like.
That would
all expenses paid to your seats to these poor people that plop down their hard-earned cash to watch years of dreck at Target Center.
I'll tell you what, though, like watching the other night the Denver-Portland game. Remember, it wasn't that long ago that Denver and the Wolves were playing that play-in game.
I was there, Dukes. It was great.
Yeah, really. You think about
I
Denver's
think the 8 through 10 now
since then
is based on that game.
Yeah, well,
because that was so much fun.
That was absolutely a ton of fun. And you could have comparable scenarios, maybe not exactly the last game of the regular season, winner to the playoffs, loser out. But, we can debate the merits of the play-in tournament. But I'll just tell you this much. I mean, the play-in tournament isn't going anywhere. It'll be back.
Yeah.
Next year. That should be a logical goal for the Wolves. I mean, if you can't be top 6 in the West, find a way to be the 7, 8, 9, or 10, right? Like, take the path San Antonio or Memphis took. Like that. Like, you need to make that step next year. But I'll just tell you, like watching Denver-Portland, the show that Damian Lillard put on the other night, any number of other playoff games, man, am I yearning for that to return here. Like, just...
You know how long it's been? Dukes, how old were you the last time, not the playoff appearance a couple years back with Tibbs, but the last time when they made that actual playoff run?
I was in my partying prime, right? I mean, I was still finger painting, but certainly not maturity prime, but partying prime. I was 24.
Yeah, and
I was working at the Fan.
7.
I mean, I was there at every game covering for the Fan back then. So I mean, I was at every Never forget Game 7 against Sacramento, the playoff series
I went
against
to one of those
the Lakers.
games. It was great. The atmosphere was so fun.
I was talking to Troy Hudson the other day. We went down memory lane. Like, Troy was really good that series. Remember, Sam Cassell went down with the injury? Gary Trent Sr. to this day, doesn't mean he's right, but to this day, he believes, 17 years later, he believes that if Sam Cassell doesn't get hurt, that they would have won the championship, that they would have won that Western Conference Final Series against the Lakers, then gone on to beat the Pistons in the
Pistons
finals.
They could have beat. The Lakers, I'm not
that
so sure about.
That Pistons team was pretty good, though. But
I
I'm
mean,
just telling you,
Gary
firmly believes if they had stayed healthy, there were some other injuries too. I mean, Hudson came back, but he was hurt for a stretch. That he believes if they had maintained full health, that they would have won the championship. And then imagine the trajectory of the franchise.
I was going to say, then things are a little different.
You know, how different are things if
Flip
they had hoisted
for
the
bad
O'Brien
start.
Trophy then?
If they win the championship, then Flip doesn't get fired a few years after for the bad start. Because if you've got a championship, you don't blow Flip out, which they shouldn't have done in the first place.
And, I mean, does KG get to the point of not necessarily demanding a trade, but
I got a question.
Making it known to some level, hey, maybe it's time for me to move on.
Yeah.
And obviously it worked out well for KG, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's cemented his overall top, we can debate this, but top 40-ish player of all time, top 35, top 30 player of all time once you win that championship, the one he won in Boston.
Celtics sweeping changes. Stevens kicks himself upstairs. Danny Ainge retires. They're going to attempt to get a new coach, but obviously changes in the infrastructure in Boston. Do you think KG is going to get himself a role there? Because it seems like the Wolves might be an option once the change has taken place, but that's going to be a transition. Do you think that KG potentially ends up with some type of job with the Celtics?
I'll tell you this much. Chauncey Billups' name is going to come up for the head coaching job there.
Saw
Remember
that
Chauncey
yesterday.
interviewed before Gerson Rosas got the Pobo job here, the president of operations. Chauncey came in for an interview.
Pobo's a great term.
I love the term Pobo.
Yeah.
I'm with Declan.
That's the legendary story where
I'm the Pobo.
Calvin Booth and Chauncey Billups had been using the same people to help prep them for that interview. Like, you go through interview training when you interview for a job of that magnitude.
Yeah.
And so their bullet points were like exactly the same, like verbatim.
Oh my God.
Like, it was a red flag that how did Chauncey and Calvin.
Yeah.
And Calvin, by the way, should be somebody's president of operations. Calvin Booth is
Pobo.
Is a genius. Pobo.
I like Pobo.
He absolutely should be a Pobo. I love Calvin. And Chauncey is a great basketball mind. And I think whether it's Boston now or a year or two from now, whatever Chauncey wants to do, head coach, or
but if
he
gets
desires
a job,
to be in the front office. Well, so what I'm saying is, if Chauncey gets that job, and I'm not making any guarantees, they're going to go through a process. Doesn't mean Chauncey's getting that job, but if he gets that job in Boston, that's one of KG's guys, right? So does that then put the wheels in motion? As far as I know, KG and Brad Stevens, the new president of operations, there's no relationship there, but Mike Zarin, assistant general manager, number 2 in command, a guy, by the way, that Tom Thibodeau wanted to bring here instead of Scott Layden. So Mike Zarin, Boston's number 2, was Tibbs' guy. So Zarin was there when Tibbs was an assistant coach under Doc Rivers. So Tibbs and Zarin got real close, but Zarin is a Boston native. He wasn't leaving the Celtics. And so, Tibbs had to go to choice 2 or choice 3, brought in Scott Layden as his general manager. But KG and Zarin have some sort of relationship. So, yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. I don't have any deep insight as to, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But sure, I mean, just based on connecting some dots, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily rule that out. I think KG does want to be involved with some franchise. Choice number 1 would be here. I do think at some point A-Rod and Laurie do approach him, but to what capacity, extent? Charlie Walters had the note in his Sunday column.
Yeah, that was
but
interesting.
KG having all this influence on front office decisions, that would surprise me. I don't necessarily foresee that happening.
Final scoops, sir. What else is in the scoop? Nope.
Well, I had a lengthy chat, about 30 minutes worth, with John Anderson, the longtime Gophers baseball coach, 40 years, a Minnesota baseball icon. And at this point, so I don't know if this is out there or not, mini scoop, whatever. He's got a multi-year contract offer on the table. So if John Anderson today wants to sign that contract, he can secure his term. He can be back for year 41 and presumably at least to year 42 as Gophers baseball coach.
Okay.
The issue is, he told me, is the language in the contract. So he will not sign that current contract that's on the table. So the ball is now back in Mark Coyle's court, Gophers athletic director. Will he change the language that John desires? So still an interesting situation. Now, in the same breath, I should tell you that John is hopeful he'll be back. He's operating right now as if he'll be back. He actually has a pretty good recruiting class coming in. He's got a kid from the state of Colorado, Alec Willis. He's been throwing at 96, 97 this prep season. Stanford wanted him. Like, this is a good get for the Gopher baseball program. John's fear is that the way this kid is throwing right now, that some major league team is going to draft him, and he'll sign.
Yep.
That if he's offered 7 figures, if he goes in the top 3 rounds, gets offered 7 figures in terms of a signing bonus, that John could lose this recruit. Like, when do you hear about the Gopher baseball team losing a recruit to the Major League Baseball draft? So John, unsolicited, brought up that possibility. I did bring the kid up specifically because I'd heard good things, but he's the one who then took it down the path of, we could lose him to the Major League Baseball draft. But what I'm getting at is John is operating, and the way he was talking about this 2021 recruiting class, I mean, this year was a disaster. COVID shutdown, last place in the Big Ten.
Yeah, they were awful.
A lot of injuries. And, I mean, they had a bunch of seniors, redshirt seniors. Not like it was a young roster, but they stunk. But he's operating as if he'll be back. But he brought up another issue. Like, he told me, it's like he's a GM. He even brought this up, Judd. This was fascinating to me. That he feels like he hasn't had these conversations yet, but he knows of other coaches that have. That you call another coach. Let's say John Anderson calls the coach at Michigan. Maybe not within the conference. Calls the coach at Kansas. Says, hey, I've got this shortstop on my roster, but I've got a shortstop above him. Good player. He would help you. What if you end up with him, and then is there a pitcher on your side? Like, almost like a trade.
Weird.
John Anderson brought that up verbatim. That he can see scenarios where programs end up trading guys. But with the portal, it's free agency. Like,
that's really interesting.
Professional sports.
Yes, it is.
It really is. And John said, like, you can call him Gophers baseball coach, but he goes, I'm like a general manager. Wow. I'm trying to assemble the roster. It's not as much the coaching. It's all that stuff. And there's still some scholarship limitations. There's ways that some other schools, based on grad transfers, bringing some guys in, like Michigan specifically, where they have bigger rosters. They're able to have more guys on the roster. John can't have that. So there's some frustration there that there are roster limitations that he deals with at Minnesota, that some colleagues in the Big Ten, some of the really good programs, Nebraska, Michigan, some others, that they don't have to deal with. But all that being said, John wants to keep going at 66 years old. So he's hopeful. But I'm just saying, it's a situation, I've said this for a few weeks, I'll continue to say it, it's a situation worth monitoring, whether John Anderson indeed will be back for a 41st year as Gophers baseball coach.
Great stuff, sir. Thanks, Dukes.
And then on the Twins.
Well, the Twins are the Twins.
Yep.
We'll get to them.
They're prepared.
We'll get to them on Tuesday.
They have their scouts out.
Yeah.
It's a very logical thinking front office.
Tease this for Tuesday's scoop.
Yeah, it's a very logical thinking front office. They're not delusional. They are going to start selling. If good offers come in even sooner than July 10th or July 15th, I think they're going to strike. That they realize, especially with all the injuries continue to mount up, even though Maeda making good progress. Buxton making good progress, I think maybe next week for Buxton's return to the lineup. So some guys are making legit progress. They know what they're dealing with. That it's too many teams to climb over at this point. That they would need to play the rest of the season at a 95 win pace.
Yeah, that's not happening.
It's just not happening. When I say 95 win pace, just to get back to being in like real contention mode, it's just not realistic. So I'm just telling you, they are prepared to strike when the offers start to come in, especially on their pending free agents.
Awesome stuff, man.
Okay. See you,
Thanks,
boys.
Dukes.